Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. That's audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Jeffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. That's betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
Good morning. Thank you for calling Nerdery, or tuning into Nerdery and Murdery with our special episode, Episode 9, Just Murdery. Today we're going to be talking with a special guest star, Kacie Mart. We're going to talk about a murder today because she has some information on Albert Fish. I believe Jeffrey has covered a little bit of Albert Fish, but it's sort of more of a deep dive. So with that, I'd like to thank Kacie Mart and let her take it away.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, Albert, he was a pesky old rascal. He was born in 1870 to Randall and Ellen Fish. And what's an interesting little side note about his parents is that his father was 43 years older than his mother. So, I suppose that was maybe a thing for the late 1800s. We can't know. But basically, there's not too much to be said about his early years. But when Albert was 5, his father passed away of a heart attack. And his mother had already had ongoing mental problems. But when his father passed away, his mother just lost her shit completely. And all 5, Albert and his siblings were sent to St. John's Orphanage in Washington, D.C. And there, Albert would basically experience anything and everything, but a lot of bullying. And I know that's right. Another side note about Albert, his born name was actually Howard Hamilton Fish, but all of his peers would call him Ham and Eggs. So he decided to take his older brother's name, Albert, who had passed away some years back or whatever. I don't know if he was alive when Albert was alive or when Howard Hamilton was alive. I don't know if he was alive, but either way, he took his brother's name. And this orphanage was pretty much a convent. And the nuns there would basically strip Albert down and beat him in front of his peers as discipline or whatever. But eventually,
The McDonald triad.
huh?
One of the standards of the McDonald triad is public shaming.
Yes. So basically, I believe that this was probably a defense mechanism, but eventually Albert began to be turned on by this, and he would actually start to climax and things like that. So, it was a little crazy for poor Albert, but eventually his mother got better when he was around 10 years old, and she got him back. But I mean, the damage was pretty much already done. And eventually Albert met a local friend, and well, I guess this is what friends do, but they were drinking their own urine and eating their own feces together. Like, some friendly fun, But, and then probably around like 11 or 12, Albert began to go to public bathhouses and pools where he was very intrigued and wanted to see people without their clothes. So, it's just all like in the making pretty much. And he, let's see, at this point, he started to kind of do sex work. 12 years old, sex work.
Okay.
And it's just, not looking good for Albert, but, let's see, around 1894, Albert is 24 at this point. He meets a man named John Davis, who is a steamboat captain at a local dock. And in these docks, it was especially known for being able to pick up a John. Like, if you were a horny sailor, that's where you went, And so John actually had a shipping route to China, North China. And if you don't know, in the late 1800s, there was a horrific famine in North China, and it lasted from 1876 to 1879. And something upwards like 13 million people died. Like, it was crazy. People were selling their children for meat and everything. So John went on to tell Albert, not just tell him, but brag about how he had killed, tortured, and eaten children, and that he had an acquired taste for human flesh. And immediately Albert was just, that. So it just put kind of a bug in his brain, and he acquired hundreds and hundreds of books on cannibalism, on serial killers and things like that. And it just kind of, But at this point, his mother kind of started to worry about him, not because of the cannibal shit or anything like that, but because this is the late 1800s. If you were a middle-aged man and you weren't married, it was just unheard of. What are you doing being a bachelor? Blah, blah, blah. So Mommy Dearest, she basically arranges a marriage with a woman named Anna. And things actually, they hit it off. They were great. And within however many years it took, they had 6 whole children. So they were just incredibly busy. Yeah. And it's just like, it's just fucking mind boggling. But at one point, Albert started to kind of like have like a slew of like petty crimes and things like that. And he went to jail at one point for fraud. And so he was gone for a little bit, but after he got out of jail, he basically hops right back into it all. and he begins raping young boys. After a bit, he has his first kill, but he would target the homeless and physically disabled a lot. Like, it's an easy target. Nobody's going to miss them. Nobody's going to even notice that they're gone, whatever. But just basically, yeah. His first victim, his name was Thomas Keaton. And what's interesting about Thomas, he was a physically disabled man, but Thomas ended up taking Albert to like an anatomy museum or something like that at some point. And that's where Albert he saw this exhibit, and it was basically a bisected penis, middle down, and he was intrigued by this. So not long after, he lures Thomas to a cottage out in the middle of nowhere, tortures him for 2 whole weeks.
Oh my God.
Bisects his penis, and then leaves him. But before he leaves, he covers the wound with peroxide, kisses him on the cheek, and then gives him a $10 bill, and he leaves. So it was the kiss for me. I'm like, wow, just absolutely ruthless. But that was his first kill, and it was incredibly intimate for him. But yeah, mind you, he's still married with children. But eventually Anna, his wife, realizes just something's not right with my husband. So in 1912, she decides to leave him. And you think, oh, she's going to take all the children and yay. No. She left the children with him. So, whatever, Anna, fuck off. But yeah, but Albert, he gets so devastated by this, and he's trying to find ways to cope and what to do. And at this point, he begins self-mutilating. And X-rays will show this later on when he does eventually get caught, because usually they do get caught. But X-rays show that he basically had somewhere up to 30 needles that he had shoved all in his groin, his testicles, his penis, everything. And I mean, yeah, that was his way. That was one small way of him coping with the loss of his wife, with just trying to, yeah, pretty scary. But yeah, it was really scary. But Albert was getting further and further into wanting to torture his victims and things like that. So he begins to create like tools of torture. He has a paddle that has nails in it. He has various knives and meat cleavers. He eventually makes a cat-o'-nine whip.
Yes.
I don't know if you know what it is, but it's got a firm grip on it. Has
cat-o'-nine tails.
Leather, and he made it out of his own belt. Like, he made that shit out of his own belt. Like, it's But yeah. So let's see. By the time Albert's 40, he gets back into that's right. He was into personal ads. He was into personal ads. I forgot to mention this. Whenever he was younger, and he was just basically like the equivalent of a modern day creepazoid, like sending dick pics and shit like that or whatever. So, but by the time he's 40, he gets back into the ads and things like that. And Albert's like single and ready to mingle, and he's ready to get back out there. And so he puts out ads just basically asking for somebody to be his partner and to, all this torturing and all these wonderful things. And well, nobody really bites with that one, not taking the bait with that one. But eventually, it was sometime around 1913 and 1915, he does find a second wife. They settle down, and Albert basically just gets back into his usual painting career and whatnot, because he's a painter. And a church actually gives him commission for painting a mural in the ceiling. And he is painting angels and everything, and suddenly his wife decides to leave him. But maybe she was just like Anna, got the bad bad feeling or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Well, that, and we don't really know what was going on behind closed doors.
exactly. And it's just like, God, to be a fly in that room. But yeah, she leaves him. But this, of course, Albert's devastated. And he begins to get auditorial hallucinations, much like his mother had. And so he believes that the angels, or well, back up. He believes that Saint John, the apostle, is speaking through the angels, telling him, "Go henceforth, do all the crimes and the torturing, in the name of me, Saint John, the apostle." And if nobody knows about Saint John, he wrote the Book of Revelations, and the Book of Revelations is a horror story in itself. Horrible, but yeah. So he decides, all right, I'm just gonna go out and do my shit and everything. So it's 1924. Albert's 54 years old, and he decides that he's just going. Yeah, he's gonna go crazy. He's an old man at this point. He actually looks very kind, has very beautiful blue eyes, and people would say that they were warm and welcoming and things like that. And whew, yeah, that's
Like
just
an ambush predator.
That's just what you want whenever you're a cannibal. But let's see, July 14th, 1924, Staten Island. Albert's basically watching a young child at the park play, and his mother was actually watching as well. Then she kind of took note of Albert and said he just didn't look right or whatever. Later on, that little boy didn't come home whenever he left to play a game of baseball with his friends. And she, of course, remembered, oh, that old man, something wasn't right with him. And sure enough, his friends come back and say he was lured into the woods by an old man. And when we went back there to get him, he was hung up by his own suspenders. He had been strangled. And then Albert had stripped one of his hamstrings from the back of his thigh. Just one of them. Yeah. Stripped. So this little boy's name was Francis, by the way, Francis McDonald, and he was only 8 years old. So yeah, that happened. But basically, it just started a whole thing for him. And his next victim was Billy Gaffney. He was 4 years old. Billy and his friend were last seen playing in the apartment building, and suddenly the boys were missing. And later on, the friend of Billy was found on the rooftop of the apartment building, and he was just spooked. Something happened. And he said, the boogeyman got Billy. And this was just one of many of Albert Fish's nicknames. He had the werewolf of Wisteria. He had the gray man. I mean, there were so many different nicknames for him. But, we all just know him as Crazy Albert. So, Billy is an incredibly sad case. He takes Billy, and he took him to Rikers Island, which is a dump. It was a dump back then. I don't know what it is now, but
it's a prison now.
Okay, well, he took him to Rikers Island and tied him up, and then left him there overnight. But that's because Albert, our little friend Albert, wanted to go back to his house to get some of his tools of torture. And that's where he got his cat-o'-nine and a couple of knives and things. He went back at 2 p.m. in the middle of the fucking day, the next day. Billy was still there. And he proceeds to whip him to the point to where blood is just pouring down his legs. 4 years old. 4 years old. Cuts off his ears, cuts off his nose, cuts off multiple parts of his body that are most meaty. Obviously, at this point, Billy's dead. And he takes the remainder of his body, throws it into the ocean, and then takes the rest of it home and makes a stew with the ears, the nose, He roasts his belly and his butt. And the belly apparently was his favorite part. And yeah, it's just weird. Yeah, he said, the front of his body I liked the best, and a nice little fat behind to roast in the oven. I made a stew out of his ears, nose, face, and belly. I put onions, turnips, celery, salt, and pepper. It was good. I never ate a roasted turkey that was half this good and as sweet, and his sweet little fat ass behind did too. I ate every bit of the meat in about 4 days.
Good God.
Quote unquote. Yeah. Amazing. It's, you try to put your mind, you try.
Yeah, I mean,
just,
I can. I'm not saying that I understand it. I can understand doing something motivated by hunger, need, horrible things. Yeah. Those things I don't agree with them, but I can understand them. In this case, this is just.
And you can't help but just be so intrigued and like.
It's like we always say. It's like we always say, if you don't want to raise a serial killer, don't beat your kids.
Well, that is interesting. There is an interesting thing, though. It was said later on that Albert's kids, that he never harmed them.
No, I was talking about his parents.
They knew that he was a little out there, that he was a little kooky, but
I was talking about or the nuns.
Oh, well, yeah. But it's just funny that, like, he, I guess, somehow broke the cycle with his own children. I don't know. But yeah. Back to the timeline. 1928. Albert's almost 60 at this point. And that's whenever he decides to go back to the classified ads. He puts out an ad basically saying, I'm a farmer and I need some help. My wife recently left me with the 6 kids and blah, 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 blah. I'll pay you $15 a week. I'll give you room and board, blah, blah, blah. So that's a really good deal back then. And that's whenever he gets an answer to the ad from Edward Budd, which is the older sister or the older brother of Grace Budd. And that is basically Albert's most famous killing. And that's what he's known for. But he was originally going to go after Edward. But whenever he goes to the Budd family's house, he meets Grace and just falls in love with her. She sits on his lap and gives him a kiss and tells her about school and how she's really not that popular and doesn't have too many friends. Mind you, Grace has anemia, so she's pretty weak a lot and lightheaded and just kind of an easy target in general. So Albert's like, well, you're just in luck. My niece is having a birthday party today, and would you like to go? So the Budd family agrees, and that's pretty much the last time that they see Grace. He takes Grace to a cottage, much like he did Thomas, and he tells her to wait outside. He goes inside, he gets naked, and he waits inside of a closet, tells her to come inside. And then when he comes out naked, it freaks her out, obviously. For Grace, she's only 10 years old. And he just proceeds to strangle and torture her. And, nobody really even knew. Nobody... they just thought that she had gone to a party. Next day, the Budd family calls the police and just basically is like, we don't know where our daughter is. And the case basically goes cold for about 2 years. And at this point, the only kind of evidence the police have is like a telegram that Albert had sent the family. But Albert had used another name, Frank Howard, as a cover-up whenever he was setting up this whole thing with the Budd family. So that's basically the only kind of evidence that they had. But at one point, somebody came forward, and it was no, that's right. The envelope that's right. Hang on, backtrack. Albert after some time, decided to write a note to the family. And, well,
Someone else.
Well, he was writing the details of Grace's murder to the family, and that's when the police notice on the envelope that there is a logo. And with that, that's the key. The logo gets them where they need to go, and they find a printing company where this was. They go and they take samples from everybody as far as their handwriting goes, and just somebody comes forward, the janitor, and says, "Hey, I stole some of this printing paper, and but I don't have it anymore. I left it at my old apartment." And that's where they find Albert Fish, because that's where Albert is living, in his old apartment. So they get him. They caught him. They got their guy. But Albert then went on to basically just spill his guts. I've tortured over 100 people. I've molested over 400 children. I have killed a child in every state. All these things, you know, and it's just kind of like, was it really? Yeah, I don't know. But basically, his trial for the murder of Grace began on March 11th, 1935. The media was crazy. There was approximately 300 people at the courthouse. Like, it was huge. It was huge. And Albert's defense was basically that when he had gone to different psychiatrists and things like that, that they misdiagnosed him and all these things. And it's just like, no. No. Because I mean, they flat out asked him, like, do you know that cannibalism and, you know, killing people is wrong? And he says yes. Well, I mean, that right there, that's enough to, you know, he's sane. He's sane for being Albert Fish. Yeah. But they also like brought up his time in the orphanage, his marriages and things like that, and his past behavior, whatever, you know. But yeah, basically, once Grace's father takes the stand and they ask him, do you see this man in the courtroom today? And he's like, that's the motherfucker right over there. And that's really all it takes. Didn't really take much. But yeah, it's interesting that Albert Fish was actually overjoyed about getting the death penalty, because that was his ultimate fantasy, was to feel death, was to be as close to death as possible. And so, at the age of 66 years old, Albert was sentenced to death by electric chair at Sing Sing Prison in New York. And then on January 16th, 1936, at 11:09 p.m., he was pronounced dead.
So he rode the lightning.
I wish that, and obviously there's probably not going to be much evidence as far as bodies go, because Albert ate the fucking evidence. He ate his own evidence. So if we could just all get into his little brain and wander around and
understand.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I really, like, there was proof. There's only, like, he claimed to have killed so many, but there was only proof that he killed 3 people, 3 children. Oh, that was the only I feel like it's still an unsolved mystery, because there's still so much to it that is unknown.
Right on.
So yeah, that's the story of Albert Fish.
Well, thank you very much for that story. I really appreciate it. I'm sure our listeners appreciate it. They always like a good murder. Thank you again. I love the cannibal. Thank you again so much, for Kacie Mart, for coming on and talking about Albert Fish. We really appreciate it. Thank you. I would like to say to all of our Patreons, thank you for sticking with us. There are costs associated with running the show. So if you would like to support us, please do.
Yeah, y'all keep watching it.
Yeah, we also have some merchandise if you want a t-shirt or something like that. But with that, I have been Zig with your nerdery. This has been Kacie with your murdery.